The history the government hopes you never learn. Here is your host, Michael Rivero.
And aloha, America. Welcome to our show today. It is Friday, January 20th, 2017 here, and we have a brand new president. Donald Trump was sworn in as the nation's 45th president at noon Eastern Time in accordance with the Constitution, and the parties are on. And he just gave this rousing speech which sent a not very subtle message that the United States is no longer going to be part of the globalist New World Order. And it was a very inspiring speech. I got a lot of email. People were really enjoying it. And watching Donald Trump, it was kind of interesting to note, watching him when he was not speaking or signing papers, he comes across as somebody who's just doesn't have a lot of patience for ceremony and pomp and circumstance. He looked very bored and uncomfortable. And I think that's actually a good thing, because too many of our politicians are just obsessed with the ceremony and the, and the etiquette. And while Trump was formally signing his nominations for his cabinet members, he went to hand a pen to Pelosi, and Pelosi said, "Oh, no, this other person has to get the pen before I do." And it sort of shows where that mindset is, where we have to play by the protocols, we have to play by the rules. No, let's actually get the job done. So that really came off looking kind of good. Anyway, for those of you who want to call on in, and probably a lot of you do, because I'm certainly getting a lot of email about this, the phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. Mike is in the control room, ready to answer the phone when you call on in. Now, looking at Donald Trump's face, and right now we're seeing the inaugural parade, and they keep talking about Trump may get out of the car. I think that would be a very foolish and reckless thing for him to do here. But looking at Donald Trump's face when he was waiting to walk on out and be sworn in, I almost feel like the Kennedy factor is at work. And for those who don't understand what I mean, John F. Kennedy was basically a spoiled kid. His father was rumored to have made the family fortune in rum running during Prohibition. And the Kennedy boys were wild party animals throughout their whole life. And then all of a sudden, John F. Kennedy gets into the White House, and all of a sudden he realizes he really is the president. This isn't just some kind of a frat prank or something. And he just decided he was going to try and do the best job he could for the American people, which of course made instant enemies of most of the entrenched establishment back there. And it does seem like, looking at Donald Trump's face, that was the moment it really hit him. I'm the president. I'm going to have to deal with this mess now. And everybody, of course, is talking about, the honeymoon. There's always a honeymoon for an incoming president where everybody will back off and let him do what he's going to do and go easy on him. But it's going to be particularly short for Donald Trump. Now, Donald Trump's opponents are already lined up waiting for any opportunity to attack him. Of course, any incoming president knows that. But because of all that has been going on in this country for the last several years, even Trump's supporters, they're kind of nervous and waiting for that first sign of betrayal, because we've all been through so many of these changes of president. The president comes on in and says a lot of great things and campaigned on a lot of promises. Is it really going to happen? And so even Trump's most loyal supporters are waiting for that first sign of betrayal, that he's going to sell out. And again, already, I don't agree with Trump on everything. But I still think Trump at his absolute worst is a better president than Hillary at her best. Because Hillary just wanted the job just to say she had the job. She didn't even really have a solid policy coming on in. It was just going to be more of the same thing, selling access, selling decisions. The other problem Donald Trump is going to be facing is the disenchanted Americans. And this was illustrated to me. I was having a conversation with one of our neighbors earlier today about Trump's inauguration. They were going on saying, he's just another bobblehead. He's, not going to do anything. And I said, well, he's still better than Hillary. And they said, and no question, much better than Hillary, but he's still. This is a segment of the population that's going to need to be convinced that things really are going to change. And so everybody's going to be waiting for that first major gesture by the incoming Trump administration that says, yeah, we're really going to see this country turn around. Now, for the first time in the almost 23 years that I have been a political activist, I'm actually feeling enthusiastic about an incoming president. Now, back in 2008, I supported Obama, kind of lukewarm, only because I thought McCain would have been far worse for the country with his desire to lay waste to all of the uncivilized world. But with Trump coming on in, it does really feel like this is a new beginning. Now, that is not to say that we are still not in danger of a Soviet Union-like collapse. And if Trump does go back on some of his campaign promises and the wonderful things he said in his speech, that is still a real possibility. But there is a chance now, for the first time in decades, that we might actually be able to avoid that. And that's something certainly I'm going to be working toward, and hopefully you're all going to be working toward as well. We're going to take a second here to do a shout-out to our on-air affiliates and who are just rejoining the network. We're sort of wallowing in our celebration of the inauguration of Donald Trump. We're watching the inaugural parade right now, and all the speeches and ceremony going on. And again, I don't think Trump has a lot of patience for that nonsense. And I don't think we're going to see the imperial presidency that we saw, for example, under Richard Nixon, where they actually, added that fanfare to Hail to the Chief. And I noticed that they did not include that in today's festivities. They went back to the old original traditional. Now, already the foreign press is looking at all the little cues and signals going on here. And over at the Daily Mail, they have this article about the ice-cold handshake between President Trump and Hillary Clinton. And they're just saying, her face told the story of how she felt. She was just trying to maintain her calm. Somebody got a YouTube video where Bill Clinton is sitting there, obviously ogling the Trump girls, Ivanka and Melania, and Hillary turns around and sees him doing that, and she just, ignores him with as much dignity as she could. And I thought it was really great when they introduced Bill and Hillary Clinton prior to the swearing in. The crowd started chanting, "Lock her up, lock her up, lock her up," which I'm in agreement with. Not out of revenge, not out of vindictiveness, but as a deterrent to future young politicians who think they can get away with this kind of nonsense. Okay, we're going to take a phone call now. Sherry in Texas, aloha, welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Oh, thank you, Mike. I was so excited today. I was clapping and crying, and it was just so thrilling to see it finally come down. And it's funny what you were just saying about his temperament and how he is as a person from noticing his demeanor and everything. I came to the same conclusion. Trump doesn't sweat the small stuff. He goes right for the big important things. That's why he didn't put the caps on the pens, and other people were warning everyone, don't put it in your pocket until the cap's on there. He just gets out there and gets done what needs to get done.
Yeah, he's a businessman.
But then again, yes, that's what I was just going to say. But then he's not bought and paid for. See, he's ours. He's a powerful businessman, and he knows how to get things done, and he surrounds himself with the right people. He knows how to do this. And I noticed something kind of interesting. When he was first going around, when he first came in, he was greeting all the former presidents, and he bypassed Clinton. Did you see that first when he first came in?
Yes.
Clinton was Clinton angled himself so he'd be in line, and he just went right past him. And I thought that was good because that said what it needed to say. But later when he had to shake his hand, he did this. He was elegant enough to do what you have to do.
Yes.
But I like it. I miss Obama. I always like Obama's grace and elegance. He had a certain savoir-faire, and that's from a woman's point of view. He was good in social situations. He knew how to conduct himself, but then he was bought and paid for, and he had to be a certain way. Trump can be who he is,
yes.
And I love that.
Yes, basically the American people have hired Donald Trump to fix the plumbing. And when you get a plumber in to fix a leaking toilet, you don't care if they're lacking in the social graces and, if the butt crack is showing. You want somebody who knows how to do the job, and that's Donald Trump right there. Just get down and do the job, and don't go through a lot of rigmarole. And it was very obvious Donald Trump doesn't have the patience to go through all of that. and that may prove awkward in diplomatic situations. But Trump is obviously listening to some of his counselors about improving his demeanor. He still slouches an awful lot, but I notice he's working to control that kind of snort that he does, and it was kind of distracting during the primary debates. He only really did it once during his inauguration speech. So he's working on polishing his appearance, but he's going to be a reluctant prima donna, I think is a good way to describe it.
Yeah, I think so too. And he does have to step up the game a little bit when he gets in front of these dignitaries, because some of them are pretty dignified. I don't think Putin will be, though. I think they'll get along great, you know. But. Oh,
I'm sure they will. I'm sure they will. Yeah. Putin himself seems to also not be enthusiastic about too much dog and pony show around him.
Right. Yeah. Well, thanks for the opportunity to let me vent, because this was such a wonderful day for me.
Oh yeah, we're all celebrating. The work will begin on Monday, and we've got something to work on, and we've got somebody to work with, and that's really the most important thing about this victory here. It's
quick question.
Yeah, sure.
Oh, sorry.
No, go for it.
Is he going to have his own TV broadcast? Or something where we don't have to rely on this news anymore? I mean, for those who want to see him on TV and hear a real broadcast, is he going to have his own station? Did you say something like that, or did someone else?
Well, he's going to continue using Twitter and social media. His son-in-law is setting up a new media company, and by the way, let me know where I can send a resume, Don. And, of course, anytime the president wants to directly address the American people, the TV news networks are obligated to give him some airtime where he can talk to the American people over the networks. But definitely the corporate media is no longer at the top of the line, at the front of the line, rather.
Yeah, well, I've gotten pretty sick of them. So.
Everybody is. Everybody. The corporate media and the Democratic Party have shredded themselves with all this nonsense, and they apparently don't seem to understand the American people are not going to forget all of this ridiculous, childish behavior that we've seen over the last several months.
Yeah, I'm glad there weren't a whole lot of people rabble-rousing that I could see. It was mostly just the guys that were paid to do it.
Yeah, the ones dressed in black and everything, and smashing up the Bank of America and the McDonald's, and that was pretty much it.
There weren't a lot of them, were there? Because I didn't watch it a long time.
They're estimating about 500. There have been about 90 arrests, and it happened more than a mile away from the inauguration, and so the people at the inauguration didn't really have to deal with it. And while the corporate media was talking about the small crowd, Fox News did do a crane shot looking down the mall all the way to the Washington Monument, and it was a huge crowd. Of course, who would not want to be present for the inauguration of a president?
Nobody.
If I had been anywhere on the East Coast of the United States, I would have made the effort to get up there. I just couldn't get there from here in Hawaii because I can't afford the airfare, and I don't swim all that well.
Yeah, I was going to say. Well, thank you so much, Mike.
All right, well, thanks an awful lot. We're going to let you go. We're going to take a phone call from Errol in the Netherlands. Errol, what's on your mind?
Hello, Mike.
Yes.
Hello. I'm very happy that it's been all without scratches, the inauguration. And I'm very pleased to see that the future generations of people, because we must never forget, Donald Trump has made most of his speeches on Twitter. So we must never forget that the Internet is a new democracy for the next generation to come.
It's very obvious that Donald Trump is aware that the independent media and social media were critical to his victory, and that the corporate media was actively working to oppose him, defeat him, and hand the White House to Hillary Clinton. And Trump is definitely not going to forget that either. I thought it was wonderful when CNN, after all the screaming and bashing, asked for press credentials to the deplorable and were turned down with the explanation, this has nothing to do with partisanship. We don't trust you to report fairly on what's going on. And that is exactly it. 2017 is going to be the year of the rise of the independent media.
Exactly. And what I heard on Russia Today, well, let it be Russia Today. But what I heard, and they already spoke, and even in America, because they had a connection in America, Russia Today. I watched it at like 2 hours ago, and I heard the word independent media. I was like, okay, here we go. So,
well,
what we are now witnessing is a new generation, a future generation of independent media that is going to make not only America, but the world great again.
Absolutely. I mean, I have always opposed the label alternative media because there's a negative connotation to that. And that's why I've always championed either calling us ourselves the independent media or citizen journalists, although that one may be fading because already the advertisers who used to be going after the corporate media are now starting to approach all the independent media and say, we want to be advertising on your websites. So we're we're looking at growth this year, and again, it's something we've all been working toward for decades. Because the independent media and the internet is a true expression of democracy. Now, the neoliberals tried to redefine democracy as you do what we tell you and we'll pretend to have honest elections every 4 years. And everybody understands that's what's been going on.
And that's why are you so great with the website whatreallyhappened.com, because without you, we would be nowhere. This is.
I'm going to call you on that one. I'm going to call you on that one.
Okay,
what is beautiful about the independent media is there are so many of us. Now, granted, 22 going on 23 years ago, I was one of a handful, and it was a scary time because we were being attacked and threatened and all the rest of it. But today, it's all over the place. And it's not dependent on any one individual or organization, and that is why it is going to be impossible to control. Because instead of having, 5 or 6 TV networks that are owned by 5 or 6 different corporations, there are now thousands and thousands of independent media outlets of various sizes, all preserving a diversity of opinion. And when I talk about how I don't agree with Alex Jones on everything, and I don't agree with Donald Trump on everything, that's actually a good thing. Because you will listen to Alex Jones, then you will listen to me, then you will listen to Donald Trump, and you will form your own opinions, and that is what it really means to have freedom of speech, freedom of thought, freedom of ideas, the freedom to decide for yourself what is going on in the world. And that is the biggest threat to any rising tyranny, a public that is skeptical and thinking for itself. Okay, all right, we're going to switch over to Steve in California. Aloha, Steve. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Yeah, Michael, is C-SPAN under mainstream media control or not?
No, they're actually run, I think, by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting, and they're kind of their own little entity. And there's C-SPAN 1 and C-SPAN 2 that are broadcast to cable users. Then there's a C-SPAN 3 channel, which is actually reserved only to people who are within Washington, D.C. I
would suggest that Donald Trump actually use that platform right there. If it's not under mainstream media control, then just use C-SPAN if you want to talk to the people.
He could certainly do that, and he could expand it, but my understanding is that he wants to privatize the Corporation for Public Broadcasting. So we'll see how that's going to work on out. But right now, Twitter is working for him. Independent media is working for him. I don't think he's going to mess with that. Okay, we got to take a break for commercials. Thank you for the call, Steve. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. We're going to take 2 more phone calls, then we're going to close the phone lines because I got a bunch of stuff we need to talk about today here. And so we're going to go to Bob in Las Vegas. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi, Mike. It's a great day. I'm just watching this parade now on Fox, and it's just a wonderful day. I loved Trump's President Trump's speech, and he is president thanks to people like you. So you should take a bow for all the work you did, you and Claire.
If I do that, the headset falls off.
but just for today, because the work is just starting, as you always say. But I loved his speech, President Trump's speech. It was in your face, bold, visionary. Some people called it dark. I just totally disagree. It was appropriate for the times, the situation this country's facing. So I loved it. And it was, I say in your face because it was really directed at all those politicians from both parties who are on that stand, that VIP stand with Trump. So I praise him for that.
Yeah, you could almost hear that. You could almost hear the teeth cracking from all the jaws that were being
Absolutely.
clenched.
Absolutely. Obama, on many occasions, they showed him he was not clapping because it was directed against his policies and those of the Republican establishment. But I just want to say this. All those people on the parade route who were there demonstrating, I just cannot understand these people. Obviously, they're a rent-a-mob. They're being paid. But those who genuinely are against Trump on the left, he is speaking their language. He is against this permanent state of war. He is against these jobs being offshored. He's against Wall Street and these big banks taking advantage of the forgotten man and woman of this country. He's speaking their language, and they're opposing him. It's just total stupidity. I don't understand these people.
Well, what it is they got sold a bill of goods by the liberal establishment. They got their heads filled with all this nonsense about how Trump is going to round up all the gays, and he's going to lead us, he's going to let the world broil from human activity, and all the favorite liberal agenda. He's going to deport the illegals, which that he's going to do. He's going to start rounding up and deporting the illegal immigrants. That he's a racist, which he's never been. So their opposition to Donald Trump is based on a myth, an illusion that they were fed, and they just bought it hook, line, and sinker because Empress Hillary would never lie to us. And yes, there's a bunch of random mobs, but there's also a group of Stalin-esque useful idiots who are out there literally crying as Trump took the oath of office. And you have to wonder about these people, are they really capable of handling real life, or do we have to round them all up and put them in one of those hospitals with the padded rooms?
Yeah. I also thought, many elements of his speech were unifying as well.
Yes.
So it was a great speech. It was one of the best speeches I've heard. But take a bow, Mike. Take a bow. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We're going to switch over to Graham in Canada. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
I'm traveling through Kansas today, actually.
Okay.
So, this Rivero Ranger had to call in and say, hey, because I have a few things I wanted to talk to you about. For like Tuesday and Wednesday, I was beating my head because I was like, with your cold, your voice was so much lower. I was like, you sound like someone. Who do you sound like? And it finally hit me in one of your phrases. You said, you sounded like Tom Bosley off a Happy Day. So you could be a celebrity impersonator.
Well, I don't know about
but anyway,
that. I do a passable Bill Clinton, and now I'm going to have to work on a Trump impression.
There you go. I was like really desperate for some news since I've been traveling, and so I made the fatal error of tuning into NPR to try to catch a little bit of the inauguration today and just catch up. And I loved the speech. Everything I heard, I thought it was spot on. And then the 4 or 5, a little I don't even know how to describe them right now, but the news anchors there were talking and kind of patting themselves on the back and just ripping into everything he said. And I just found myself just kind of feeling nauseated because it just was really despicable and that's what so many people are still listening to, and that's how they're spoon-fed. And to address the last caller, they're just spoon-fed all this information that they don't even think for themselves. They're like, oh yeah, NPR, they're fair and balanced. They're giving us the truth, and I'm just going to go.
No, they're not. NPR basically is spooning out whatever their donors want to be spooned out, and one of the biggest donors to NPR, of course, is the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. So NPR has no more foundation to claim to be objective and unbiased than any of the other corporate-owned and operated media. All right, so
absolutely, that's what I was agreeing with that they are biased.
Okay, well, Graham, I'm going to have to let you go. I'm sorry, we got to take a commercial break. We're going to close the phone lines because I got some news when we come back. And aloha, and actually don't call now because we're going to close the phone lines for a bit here. Somebody just sent me in a picture that the liberal whiners are apparently trying to spam all over Twitter, showing the crowd that arrived at Obama's inauguration, which was huge, and then they have a picture of a very small crowd in front of the Capitol building, and it's an outright hoax. Because the photo that they're claiming is the photo of the audience listening to the swearing-in of Trump. The photo was taken a couple of hours before. And I know because I was watching the crowd coming on in, and I recognized the sparseness as being from like about 2 hours before. Fox News did a long shot down the mall looking toward the Washington Monument. There was a huge crowd there. They weren't able to scare them off. And still these liberal whiners and prostitutes and correspondents cannot rid themselves of their addiction to spin and fraud and hoaxes and so forth and so on. They ought to be ashamed of themselves, but I'm sure having your conscience and ethics surgically removed is now mandatory for those kind of jobs. Now, getting on to Donald Trump. Tonight are all the parties. This weekend we're going to have to deal with the tantrums from all these snowflakes and buttercups smashing windows and everything. Monday, the real work begins, and Donald Trump is about to take an axe to government spending and federal bureaucracy. He's asking Congress for a law to make it easier to fire public workers. It is long, long, long overdue. And we have reported many times over the last years how government workers that are supposed to be looking out for you, whether it's the Securities Exchange Commission, the Minerals Management Service, the FDA, are instead just sitting in their offices surfing online porn on taxpayer-funded computer systems because there really isn't that much for them to do. They're just feather bedding, and they can't be fired. Well, Donald Trump is somebody who believes in firing people when they're not performing, and I think that is a very healthy thing to come back to Washington, D.C. And Trump staffers are saying they're already starting to look at cuts. As I mentioned to that earlier caller, the Corporation for Public Broadcasting is going to be privatized. The National Endowment for the Humanities is going to be cut entirely. There are going to be cuts to the funding for the Departments of Commerce and Energy. And most of the programs under their jurisdiction either eliminated or moved to another agency. Now, Donald Trump is pulling the plug on all this climate change, global warming nonsense, saying that our industries are already overburdened with way too much gratuitous regulation, and he's absolutely correct. And too many politicians sort of suffer from the law of the hammer. And if you don't know what I'm talking about, there's an old story that if you give a small child a hammer, all of a sudden everything they encounter needs pounding. And if you give somebody the ability to create laws, everything that they encounter needs some kind of a law or regulation. And many of them are pointless. Many of them don't actually serve a useful purpose. Many of them do nothing more than give you more paperwork to fill out and more government fees to pay. And we know that all this screaming and crying about carbon dioxide and global warming is a bunch of nonsense. We'll get into that a little bit later in the show here. Getting on back to the protesters, there were a couple of hundred people outside the Deplora Ball, and the cops are not holding back pepper spraying them. And flashbang grenades. Apparently one of the pro-Trump people was saying that these anti-Trump protesters are violent. One of them attacked him with a flagpole, must have torn a flag down someplace. It's just hitting people with it. And they have arrested about 90 of them, and I think they need to start saying, were you paid to be here? If so, who paid you? Because that's conspiracy to incite violence and rioting. Now, up in New York City, Michael Moore, Robert De Niro, Cher had a big thing outside Trump's hotel. And Sex and the City star Cynthia Nixon came on out and said, there are those who are working to divide us. We are not going back. We are not turning around, which in and of itself is a pretty divisive statement right there. But apparently their divisiveness is good and everybody else's divisiveness is bad. And they're already out there screaming that the LGBT page at the White House has been taken down. That doesn't mean Trump is going after the LGBT community. That simply means Trump thinks he's got more important things to be concerned about than what restrooms everybody is using. And Donald Trump probably understands, better than most liberals, that government shouldn't be meddling in issues of morality anyway. It's not their job. Now, over an Investment Watch blog, they're pointing out the obvious hypocrisy here, where Democrats are out there protesting the Trump inauguration, but how many Democrats stood up and protested Bernie Sanders being cheated of the nomination, which we all know actually happened because of the leaked DNC emails, and even Barack Obama is now saying they were leaked. There wasn't a Russian hack. And still the Democrats, they've lost touch with reality. And apparently a Democratic Congressman, Raskin, is going to file impeachment charges claiming Donald Trump is in violation of the Emoluments Clause because he's refused to divest himself of business interests he has around the world. Well, Trump isn't running that anymore. He's turned it over to his sons. And where was Raskin when Hillary Clinton was facilitating the sale of 20% of America's uranium resources to a Russian-owned company? It's just amazing here. The Democrats that are still out there screaming about all this stuff are hypocrites and crybabies, and they, along with Hillary Clinton, have destroyed the Democratic Party's legitimacy and credibility. They will be decades. They may even have to change their name and rebrand after all of this nonsense. More and more articles coming on out about how obvious Obama was in trying to hamstring Trump, leaving things messed up so badly that Trump is just going to have to deal with that, and it's going to hinder him moving forward on his own agenda. And according to this article out of oilprice.com, in the process, Obama has actually undermined U.S. strategic capability by making it difficult for Trump to govern efficiently. Now, Obama was out there in his farewell address and interviews saying about how his plan was to stick around Washington, D.C. And he's going to still be involved with the government. And he made a comment about if he thinks Trump is misbehaving, he's going to speak out. Now, there's no law about this, but the tradition has been an outgoing president waits one whole year before criticizing his successor. And Obama is basically saying, I'm not going to wait the year. And then Trump reminded him of the new White House policy, where people who have served in the White House are banned from engaging in lobbying activity for 5 years, and Trump said, it applies to you. And apparently witnesses who were watching Obama's side of the phone conversation just said he just lost it. He just melted down there. He's being told, you are persona non grata in Washington, D.C. So, a lot of articles coming on out. This one from shtfplan.com. Goodbye to the worst president America has ever had. And that is certainly true as well. Everyone's always talking about Obama's legacy. What will be his legacy? Well, let's take a look at some of what the legacy has been here. I mean, when President Obama took office back in 2009, the national debt was $10 trillion. It's doubled during his 8 years in office. The average debt per U.S. citizen was $31,000 8 years ago. Today it's $61,000. Labor force participation when Obama took office, 65%. Now it's 62%. And I don't even trust that number. Real median household income has gone down. Health insurance costs have skyrocketed. The tax-to-benefit ratio has inverted. It used to be less than 40% when Obama came into office. Now it's greater than 60%. many millions more people dependent on food stamps, many millions more living in poverty. Yeah, that is Obama's legacy as he leaves office, along with all of the anger and hostility around the world from all these wars. And that's basically it. 8 years of war, 3,000 regulations, an additional nearly $10 trillion with a T in debt. And there's all the scandals. And Obama got up there trying to polish his legacy, saying that he was scandal-free and he was transparent. Anything but. I mean, Benghazi. Story out of AmericanFreedomFighters.com. They've got a list of 884 examples of Obama's lying, law-breaking, corruption, cronyism, hypocrisy, and waste. Now, Obama is trying to position himself as the nation's first black president. And I want to start off by reminding everybody that he's not totally black. His mother, Ann Dunham, was obviously very white. So Obama is partially black. And in that context, you need to remember that Obama is not, in fact, the first black president of the United States of America. And there's an article that lists the 7 black presidents preceding Barack Obama. And probably most of you don't realize how many of these presidents had black ancestry, including Thomas Jefferson, Andrew Jackson, Abraham Lincoln, Warren Harding, Calvin Coolidge, and even Dwight D. Eisenhower. Now, probably most of you are believing that George Washington was our first president. Well, he was the first president of the formal United States after the adoption of the Constitution. But we actually had presidents serving after the completion of the Articles of Confederation. One of them, John Hanson, was totally black. Little reminder there. History is not often what you are told it is. So Obama doesn't even get to claim that one either. Now, Obama commuted in his last day in office 330 sentences. It's the most commutations in a single day by any president in the U.S. history. So he gets to put that one in his little record book here. Now, a lot of those commutations, and this attracted a lot of attention, were cocaine dealers, possibly involved with the Cocaine Importation Agency. And underscoring that discrepancy is apparently requests for clemency by pot dealers were turned down. Now, here's the good news. Former President Obama is not the president anymore, and he did not issue a blanket pardon for Hillary Clinton or her family or anybody. So, no protection against the coming investigations. And the Clintons are already panicking. They've shut down the Clinton Global Initiative. They're shredding documents. It was exposed as a pay-to-play political slush fund. The Clinton Foundation itself is pretty much shut down. For some reason, after Hillary lost the election, all those foreign donations just dried right up. In fact, there were even some requests for refunds. But the Clinton Foundation may be dead and headed for the shredder, but the cases against Hillary are not. She is still open to prosecution, and she should be. And there's an interesting speculation going around that her husband, Bill, may cut a deal and sell Hillary out to protect himself. Because there's this special grand jury probing her shameless corruption. The IRS is still looking as to whether the Clinton Foundation truly qualified as a nonprofit charity. And we already know it did not, because under the rules of a 501c3, you have to donate 51% of your proceeds to whatever the charity is you're supporting. And the Clinton Foundation's charitable donations amounted to single digits of their total revenues. If the IRS declares that the Clinton Foundation was never a legal nonprofit charity, that tax bill is going to turn the Clintons into poor people. And that is the most fitting punishment for a money junkie. Far worse than death. Make them poor people again. Just like all the Americans, they made poor people. And that was one of the things I really liked about Donald Trump's speech, where he was talking about how great life was for the politicians and the elites at the expense of ordinary American people. And I'm sure the liberal corporate media is already denouncing, oh, he's a communist, he wants to redistribute the wealth. Now, George Soros, who I'm sure is having to double up on his blood pressure medication following Trump's inauguration speech, is already out there screaming, Theresa May won't last. Donald Trump's a would-be dictator. Soros is already out there saying he's going to find some way to bring Donald Trump down. Because Trump, during his inauguration speech, came on out and basically said, we're not going to be part of this global government New World Order empire. But maybe Soros isn't going to have the opportunity to do that. Now Macedonia is getting on the bandwagon to take a closer look at George Soros and the Open Society Foundations. Now over in Brussels, they're screaming that Donald Trump is coming to crush Europe. He's going to destroy the European Union. Only, what, a week ago they were saying Russia was coming to destroy the European Union? Does Europe think they're going to declare war on the United States? Does Europe think they're going to succeed in a war against Russia if the United States doesn't show up? A lot of rhetoric there, not much thought behind it. And on her way out the door, Ambassador to the United Nations Samantha Power was out there with a screed about the surge in anti-Semitism in the United States and how can you let this happen? There is no surge in anti-Semitism. There is a surge in just legitimate criticism of the actions of the government of Israel. And they are not the same no matter how many times Bibi Netanyahu screams that they are. We'll be right back. America, welcome back to our show here. Now, a few days ago, CNN, which I have decided stands for crappy non-news, ran this segment with Wolf Blitzer speculating that if something were to happen at the inauguration and Donald Trump and Mike Pence were to be killed, you know, that a member of Obama's cabinet who just happened to not be there would be required to take over the presidency, proving that Wolf Blitzer doesn't actually know how the government works or the rules for the succession. And it's triggered outrage around the world. In the foreign press, the Daily Mail, they're just saying that CNN was inciting violence, traitorous, and again, the corporate media is just dissolving itself at this point here. Now, over in Indiana, apparently at the YMCA, somebody got a little upset over the fact that CNN is putting out all of this fake news to the point where the YMCA requested a block from their cable TV company. So you can't get CNN on those TVs at the YMCA anymore. I'd like to see that available to us all. You know, why are we forced to have those news networks and pay for them with our basic cable fee? Can't we turn them off and maybe get a little bit of a discount? Would make sense to me. Give us the option of going to some other media, like Russia Today, which at least on our cable, you have to request as part of a special expanded package. And over at the New York Slimes, their last desperate gasp to try and keep this whole illegitimate president thing going, New York Slimes is reporting that a group of, as usual, anonymous American law enforcement intelligence agencies are claiming they have intercepted communications between Russian officials and associates of President-elect Donald Trump. you know, there comes a point where you do have to stop flogging that dead horse. Now, story coming out of TASS where a Russian expert on disarmament issues, Arbatov, is saying that Donald Trump's statement on nuclear disarmament as a condition for the lifting of sanctions it's impromptu and it's premature and wasn't thought all the way through. And Russia's position is disarmament in the long run is a good idea. We would all like to live in a world without these city-destroying weapons hanging over all of us like the sword of Damocles. However, after years of Russia bashing by the U.S. war hawks, many of whom are still holding office, and that NATO build-up on the borders, tensions with Russia are not going to be switched off overnight just because Trump is the president. So it's going to have to take bit by bit by bit by bit. And I'm sure Donald Trump understands this. Going to do a break for station identification. Back with hour 2 after these few words. Hello, hi America. Welcome back to our show, hour number 2. We're still closing the phone lines because I got a bunch of stuff to get through before the Lady Claire shows up for our hour of clarification in hour number 3 of the show today here. Now, we are hearing that supposedly as part of their obligations to NATO, Germany is now deploying their forces in the Baltic region near Russia. Now, I wouldn't read too much into this because obviously if Donald Trump is not interested in provoking and participating in a war with Russia or China, Europe and NATO certainly cannot do it all on their own. And what we may be seeing is the end result of plans that were made a while ago, and it's going to take a little time for all of these things to wind down here. Now, a document has surfaced from 1983 in which it was suggested that the United States should encourage Saddam Hussein to attack Syria to secure that oil pipeline to the Mediterranean and the Gulf. That pipeline has been a sticking point in everybody's throat for a long time. And the reason Assad didn't want the pipeline was simple. Israel's been harvesting oil out of the Golan, which is still technically Syrian territory. And then they turned around and said, we want to build a pipeline across your country so we can sell the oil we stole from you to Europe. And Assad said, no, I'm not going to go along with that. And that was kind of part of that whole run-up. We have to get Assad. And they wanted him out for a long, long time. And apparently, Saddam Hussein, if he was approached to attack Syria, turned them down. Because Iraq's war with Iran had also been begun at the behest of the U.S. government, and that didn't really go very well either. And maybe that's why the government took him out. He wasn't doing what he was told. He failed to conquer Iran. He failed to conquer Syria. We need somebody else in there. Okay, now then, let's talk about economic news a little bit. Over in California, Governor Jerry Brown is admitting that the state budget had a little tiny, itsy-bitsy, teensy, really not worth fussing about accounting error of $1.5 billion. In other words, California has a shortfall of $1.5 billion. They spent more than they took in tax revenues, and they're saying it was an error in accounting. We deeply apologize. Really, we'd like to see that over your letter of resignation. But let's be forgiving because math errors are possible. I did one yesterday when I was talking about the missing $9 trillion from the Federal Reserve, and I said that works out to about $3,000 for every American citizen. I was corrected by some of our very smart, alert listeners and readers. It's actually $30,000 for every living man, woman, and child in the United States plus the accruing interest. Now, IBM has just posted their 19th consecutive revenue drop. If you are living in the western part of the continental United States of America, the Save-A-Lot franchise are closing all their stores in Nevada and California. I mean, even the low-end bargain basement stores aren't able to make it here. Down in Venezuela, which could easily be a forecast of what could happen here, inflation has hit 800%, their gross domestic product shrinks 19%. It's all because of that 11th marble. It's all because of those private central banks, which by design create more debt than money with which to pay the debt. I would like to hope that Donald Trump understands this is what's going on with all these global economies failing, and that he would have the courage to do something about it, knowing that the private central bankers are not above wars and assassination to keep the human race enslaved to their little scam. Now, over in Minnesota, their House has passed a bill to provide relief for health insurance premiums for 120,000 Minnesotans who simply can't deal with the skyrocketing cost of health care insurance caused by Obamacare. And it may be a stopgap measure only, because we're already seeing the incoming Congress and Trump get ready to get rid of Obamacare and come up with something that's actually about making sure Americans are getting health care rather than another way to loot their pockets. Now, if you like to fly, you better get ready for a shock. Airline travel, years ago, used to be wonderful, comfortable, they gave you free things. And today, they really are just buses with wings. American Airlines has a new, what they call basic economy class. And you're not allowed to have carry-on bags or use the overhead bins. They're basically just throwing you on the plane like you're cattle. If you want to use the bins and have a carry-on, you have to pay extra now on American Airlines. That's getting a little ridiculous, and I'll tell you why. When I travel, I usually have some camera gear with me. And I already know that you do not trust high-end camera gear, or for that matter, computers, to checked baggage. If it doesn't get stolen, it'll get broken. I've had baggage looted, checked baggage looted. And even if you do carry-on, you're not free from risk. I had a very expensive high-end laptop destroyed by the TSA up in Seattle. Travel's become high risk in this country here. We're going to do a shout-out now to our on-air affiliates who are rejoining our network. We're talking about various issues. And let's get into human-caused global warming here, because it's going to be an issue. It's going to be a talking point. Trump is already out there talking about killing the climate action plan, saying our American industries, if we're going to make America great again, if we're going to bring back manufacturing, we have to get rid of all of this red tape that cripples it. And by the way, all of this overburden of regulation is another reason why so many companies want to go do business in other countries. There's a lot less paperwork, there's a lot less fees to be paid. And in 9 times out of 10, all of this claim about we must regulate this for this purpose, it turns out to be completely bogus. Dangerous products are still getting through, as long as the owners of those corporations are funding the right congressional campaigns. Now, Al Gore is out with the sequel to his original movie about global warming, An Inconvenient Truth. And he's titled this one An Inconvenient Sequel, Truth to Power. And it had its debut at the Sundance Film Festival and opened to below freezing temperatures and heavy snow. Now, the founder of the Weather Channel is already out there saying that Gore's Inconvenient Sequel is another scientific monstrosity. It is filled with as many inaccurate misstatements and outright deceptions as the original. Now remember, the original documentary, Inconvenient Truth, the courts in Great Britain issued an order that before any teacher could show Inconvenient Truth to their class, they had to read a list of 11 known false statements in that documentary. And Al Gore's still out there pushing this thing. He's funded heavily by George Soros, who wants all kinds of restrictions on oil and coal companies to drive their stock price down so he can pick them up for a song. There is snow in the Sahara Desert. And we're not talking a little dusting, we're talking feet of it. And everybody was just scratching their head. Now, it happened a few weeks ago, and when it happened there, first time snow in the Sahara, 37 years, and all the carbon Nazis and global warming people were saying, well, it's an anomaly. It's a fluke, never going to happen again. And it just now happened again. It's snowing down in New Zealand. And what makes that interesting is it's the middle of summer down there. Now, we've had a major cold snap in the American heartland to the point where there has been panic buying. And supermarkets and big box stores are selling out of things like water and storable food, because people are all of a sudden realizing for the rest of this winter, there are going to be power blackouts. There are going to be times when they cannot drive on the roads. Meanwhile, of course, the corporate media is still out there running around with the story that 2016 was the hottest year on record. And that story is already falling apart. The claim that it was the hottest year on record and hotter than the previous year is based on 1/100th of a degree at the end of all their calculations and adjustments, and even they admit the margin for error in all of this is 1/10 of a degree. And yet they're seizing on that 1/100th of a degree to just go on out and say the planet is broiling, the temperature soared past last year, and it's all the fault of human activity. Now, if you go back and you look at the raw satellite data, there is no warming for the last 18 years. But everybody who was invested in that global warming hoax, they're trying to hang on to their funding, or they're trying to cling to their reputation, or they just cannot bring themselves to admit that they themselves got taken in by a gigantic hoax by Al Gore and George Soros and everybody else who thought they were going to get rich on carbon credits. Now, over in Great Britain, the taxpayers are being soaked for another $206 million on another green scandal. Companies started up, said, we're going to develop a system to capture carbon dioxide from power plants, and then we'll store it underground. That didn't work. They never came up with a method. So what's behind all this global warming nonsense? Follow the money. Between 1993, when Al Gore first came on out there and started screaming about global warming, through fiscal year 2013, we don't have numbers for the last couple of years, the U.S. government spent $165 billion with a B of your dollars funding climate change research and propaganda. $165 billion. So of course they're going to find scientists who are out there saying, oh yeah, for enough funding, I'll say the world is broiling. And that's exactly what's been happening. Okay, we're going to go ahead and open up the phone lines now if you want to call on in. 800-313-9443, 800-313-9443. Today marks 1,000 days since the city of Flint, Michigan had safe, clean drinking water coming out of their faucets. 1,000 days ago, the city of Flint shut off the tap to the Lake Huron water they'd been using from the Detroit Water and Sewage Department and began drawing and using water from the Flint River, which is heavily, heavily polluted. Now, we've been talking about medications, prescription medications, vaccines, and interactions, and there's actually a danger out there that a lot of people really don't pay attention to. And that is that certain medications do not react well with certain foods. And we're talking healthy, organic, natural foods, not synthetic GMO. And you really need to read the labels on your medications, because apparently there's been a new study showing that if you're eating grapefruit and you take statins, it can have an adverse reaction. It can actually make the drug more potent to the point where it goes past being a benefit, if indeed it ever was one, and actually cause harm. It can actually cause your muscles to start breaking down. We're going to take a phone call here. Francis in Vancouver. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi, Mike. I just wanted to call in today and say how happy I am to see that Donald Trump finally got to be president.
Yes.
Against all odds. And in particular, I wanted to draw all your listeners' attention to one of the unsung heroes of the day, and that's Senator Jeff Sessions.
Yes.
Who stood up to amnesty 3 times, and he led the fight against it. And he also led the fight against the TPP, which was also extinguished today.
Yes.
And that's a great news for everybody in the world. And I just, we really dodged a bullet by just a hair with this election. And I want to thank all the Americans that voted for Donald Trump, because if Hillary had won, right now we'd be looking at, in the first 100 days, she'd give amnesty to 36 million illegal immigrants. And the day after she did that, 100 million people, the worst people, would pack their bags for the United States. And they'd be thieves, prostitutes, pimps, child molesters, rapists, all sorts of grifters, just the worst people.
And even worse, even worse, more politicians.
Well, that's it. And basically it'd be the end of Western civilization. And so, it was a very close call, and I just want to thank everybody for making Donald Trump's by no means the best one. I never was a big fan of him. He's kind of an obnoxious character, but God bless Donald Trump. I'm so glad he's president right now.
Yeah, me too. Absolutely, me too. And again, as I was saying in the first hour of the show, this does not mean that the United States is no longer headed to a Soviet Union-style collapse. It could still very easily happen, especially with the economic realities. But with Trump there in the Oval Office and all of the American people working together, there is a chance we could turn things around and save this nation. And we got to roll the dice and take that chance.
Well, he's not perfect. I was just reading now, there's all this breaking news now, of what all his new appointments, and it's all pouring out today. And one concern on all the tech sites like Ars Technica, and that is that Trump has asked Ajit Pai to lead the FCC. And Ajit Pai is a well-known opponent to net neutrality. So that is worrisome.
Yeah, it is. And as I've said before, there are a lot of things I don't agree with Trump on. But again, looking at the alternative, and every election is always a choice between the lesser of two evils. There never has been in my lifetime. I've never seen an absolutely perfect candidate for me.
Well, Trump has a lot of things, but I don't think he's a murderer. And if you go and to YouTube and go watch a video called "Obstruction of Justice in Mena, Arkansas," it's just, I showed that film to a friend of mine who's a doctor, and he's a pretty happy-go-lucky guy. At the end of the film, he was yelling. He says, how can people be so evil?
Yes.
The Clintons and all that whole Arkansas mafia, those people were so evil in what they did, and all the people they murdered and everything. It was and it was just right in, people a lot of people just wake up to how the media has been lying to us. But when I saw that video, I was astounded, because I've always really followed the news, even back when I was a little kid, right? I've been a news junkie all my life. And when I saw Obstruction of Justice in Mena, Arkansas, just a 50-minute film, it astounded me that the media, when the Clintons first came on the scene, and, Dr. Joycelyn, what's her name, Evers or whatever, all these people that the Clintons brought to Washington were all horribly corrupt, evil people, and the media just completely covered it up. There was a wall of silence.
Well, the reason for that is because it wasn't just the Clintons at Mena, Arkansas. It was the Central Intelligence Agency, which also exerts tremendous control over the corporate media. And it wasn't even just the Clinton family. The Bushes were involved. This whole Operation Screw Worm was being run by then Vice President George Herbert Walker Bush, but it was all illegal, a violation of the Boland Amendment, a violation of the Logan Act, and everybody involved got very, very rich on cocaine money, and that was the start of this narcocracy, which has ruled this nation ever since. And bringing that narcocracy down was a big part of my motivation for this last election. Anyway, Francis.
You know who owns Arkansas? I got one thing to say.
Okay, hang on. Francis, I'm going to hold you over the commercial break. Don't hang up. We'll be right back to you. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. We're going to go back to Francis in Vancouver. You had one more thing you wanted to share with us.
Well, yeah, who owns Arkansas? Well, the Rockefellers. I mean, Jay Rockefeller, right? And even when George Herbert Walker Bush first ran for Congress, I mean, he was vilified and hated because he was labeled a Rockefeller Republican.
Yes.
That was back in the 60s, early 60s.
Well, you know, we're coming to understand that, you know, our government has been dominated by rich people for quite a long time. And, again, when this nation was set up, there were laws to limit the influence of rich individuals over what was supposed to be a nation that belonged to and was ruled by the American people. And over time, those laws have been chipped away. And based on his inauguration speech, I think Donald Trump is probably thinking about reimposing campaign donation limits and other controls. Certainly, he's got to be looking at how George Soros was spending all that money to keep him out of the White House. And I think now that Trump is in the White House, the gloves are going to come off on a lot of these issues. And I've already sent him a paper letter, because I know they just scanned the email. I sent him a paper letter congratulating him and saying, look, the next thing you got to do, got to have honest, verifiable, trustworthy elections that the American people have confidence in as being honest. And I pointed him at Bev Harris and blackboxvoting.org. And hopefully somebody at the White House will actually read that and take action on it.
Okay, well, thanks a lot, Mike.
All right, thanks an awful lot. We're going to switch over to Gary in Saskatchewan. Aloha, welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Yes, sir. Well, I was just thinking about business, right?
Yes.
And government is supposed to be a business, of course, right?
No, government.
No. But I'm just going to say Trump is running it like a business. And these people that complain about these people that he's installed, he's taken resumes and he's putting in the best people that he knows. And if he don't like them, my friend, he'll run them.
Yeah, I mean, I absolutely agree. The issue of Trump's appointments is a complex one. Yes, he is looking at people who can actually do the job. Remember after World War II was over, when General Patton came under severe criticism because he was bringing back some of those Nazi civil officials to do their jobs, to continue on. And they were saying, oh, we're supposed to be denazifying. And he says, well, when you find somebody who knows how to do the job, I'll be glad to let this person go. But right now we need the buses running and the sewers working and the electricity. And these are the people who know how to make it work, their politics aside. The other issue that Trump has to deal with is getting the confirmations. Now, the confirmations have actually run a lot more smoothly than a lot of people were expecting. But there were obviously people that Trump probably wanted and realized he would never get through the confirmation process. So that was complicating it as well. But in the end, you know, Donald Trump definitely is a hands-on manager. He's not going to let the government run itself. He's not going to let his subordinates run the government for him. He's going to be treating his cabinet and his other appointments the way he treated, you know, those contestants on The Apprentice. You do what I tell you. You don't deliver, you're fired. Right.
I was going to say, like, do you think he's going to repeal all those Obamas?
We're hearing that there are already 200 executive orders waiting for his signature, and some of them definitely deal with issues of amnesty and protection for the illegal immigrants and the refugees. You want to talk about a jobs program to put Americans to work, put them all out there with big giant nets and start chasing down these illegals dragging them to the border. We can get all those punkin' chunkin' people to modify their machines and just fling them back over the border. The prizes are awarded for the longest distance and the most bounces.
Well, I'll tell you, man, like, I'm pumped, not pumped up, but I'm excited. And, like, he's a no BS type guy. And if he don't like you, like I'm telling you, like, he'll fire people.
Yeah, he's already saying he wants the law to make it easier. Like, yeah. I mean, the good thing about Donald Trump.
And his thought pattern is business.
Yes.
And love and care, you know. I mean, wow, like Dr. Paul Craig Roberts come out with a piece here last week or a couple days ago on a video, and he says, what's wrong with billionaires? He says, I've known guys, I can't recite their names, but he said that fought against NAFTA.
Yeah, I mean, there are some billionaires who just got lucky and they do good things with their money, and there are other billionaires who think their money gives them the power of God, like George Soros.
I think Trump is one of them.
One of the former ones. Okay, we got to let you go. Got to take a break for commercials.
Okay, yeah, thank you.
We'll be back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. The phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. Now, Costco apparently has reached an agreement to pay an $11.75 million settlement to settle allegations that some of its pharmacies were improperly filling prescriptions for controlled substances and failed to properly track opioids and other dangerous drugs, according to the Department of Justice. And we know that prescription opioids have become an out-of-control problem. There were these executives at a pharmaceutical company that were literally trying to get pharmacies and doctors to prescribe these opioids to create addicts and a guaranteed income stream. It's getting harder and harder to see that there's any moral or ethical difference between these giant pharmaceutical corporations and the guy down on the street corner selling their wares. Now, yesterday we were talking about the introduction of a genetically engineered pineapple, which has been approved by the FDA without any independent safety testing. The FDA has basically said that as far as we're concerned, the change to the pineapple isn't significant. It colors it pink. That's it. It's a pink pineapple. I'm certainly not going to be ever grabbing one of those. Apparently, the first GMO apples will start arriving in U.S. stores next month, February. These are going to be a little bit harder to spot. The GMO alteration is to fight the browning and aging in order to reduce loss and increase profitability. And without any kind of GMO labeling, we're looking at the situation of either take the risk of eating the GMO apples or not buy any apples at all, which I think is probably the way that I'm going to go on this one. All right, let's take a phone call. Al in Canada, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi, Mike. I hope you're doing well.
I'm doing much better. Thank you.
Yeah, you do sound a lot better. I'm just tuning in, so I don't really know if you had you like personally heard Donald Trump's inauguration speech or not.
Oh yeah, I watched it live.
Oh really? And how did that make you feel?
Well, I mean, it was a great speech. It was very much in your face. It was certainly not your normal lukewarm speech that you get from an incoming president in this country. And he sent some not very subtle messages out there to the current entrenched establishment, and certainly to Soros and the globalists, that the United States is not going to play along with that nonsense anymore.
Yeah, I kind of got that sense myself. When was the last time you ever heard a politician speak like that? Because he's formally now a politician.
Yeah, he's formally a politician, but he's a brand new politician. He's never been one before. And so I think that was one of the reasons why people resonated with him. He doesn't act like a politician. He doesn't sound like a politician. He still doesn't, even though he's president. He's working on refining his posture and the snorting thing that he does. but you could tell on his face he just has no patience for all of this ceremony and ritual and all this dog and pony rigmarole that Washington, D.C. politicians, career politicians, eat, sleep, and breathe. You know, it's all protocol. It's all how we behave. And it's another reason why they're not paying attention to what's going on in America. They're too busy memorizing the protocol rules. And that little situation with Nancy Pelosi in the pen when Obama was formally signing all of his nominations for his cabinet officials, where, you know, he hands Pelosi the pen and she says, oh, no, this other guy has to get one before me. And you could just see it on Trump's face. It's like, what difference does it make? Really? And I think that's one of the reasons why ordinary people are resonating with him, because Donald Trump is the kind of president that any of us real Americans out here in the hinterland would probably be if through some miraculous set of circumstances we were given that office.
Yeah, almost everyone I know, you know, is for Trump and hope he does well. You know, there's a very good chance that he could usher in, you know, a new era of peace and prosperity that, you know, you American folks haven't seen in decades.
Yes, you're absolutely right. Now,
the way he talks, and, you know, the lobby groups are in panic mode over this guy. I know for a fact, because of the things he wants to do, especially with lobbying.
Yes.
Which is, that's almost all of the corruption.
Well, you know what? What's really interesting is that, again, going back to Trump's appointments, when he announced that rule that anybody working in his White House would be banned from lobbying for 5 years after serving, a lot of the people withdrew their application and said, no, I don't want to work for your administration. Lobbying is what I do. Lobbying after serving in the White House is the payoff that we get the big bucks for. And so a lot of people Trump had originally chosen to be part of his administration have quit because they'd rather be highly paid lobbyists than rather far less paid staffers on the White House.
Yeah, well, even Abramoff pointed that out.
Yes.
That's his name, right? Yeah. Another quick thing is what I totally admired about Donald Trump, appointing Robert Kennedy Jr.
Yes.
Look into this vaccine nonsense.
Oh, my goodness, that just shook up the
epidemic.
Yeah, and he's yanking this climate, global warming nonsense. Yeah.
Off the website. And I think LGBT rights is already gone. Like, where do these people get off thinking that, well, we have to have rights? You already have rights. It's right in the U.S. Constitution. All men are created equally. That's it. And men is a euphemism, obviously, for humanity.
Well, no, hang on a second. When you hear a special group like LGBT or blacks or Hispanics or women talking about rights, what they're really talking about is special privileges that give us an advantage over our imagined oppressors.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Just before I leave, just a little small side note. A friend of mine had surgery, and I drove him. He's going to be collecting unemployment benefits, and he had to produce a doctor's note. So we were in, you know, one of these government offices this afternoon, and we were talking about Trump and the wall and all that. And my good God, right behind me, like, I didn't even see them. About 7 or 8 Mexicans walked in.
Yes.
We're talking like this. And I turned around, I looked, and I'm like, oh, boy. And we're in a government building, you know. We have a liberal government, and it's, you know, all PC and all that. So it was kind of a little embarrassing, but at the same time, we kind of chuckled, right? Anyway, great show.
Well, thank you very much here. Now,
thanks, Mike.
All right, well, thank you very much. We're going to let you go here. And on that issue of illegal immigration, and now it's cool to call it illegal immigration again and get away from this undocumented workers nonsense, where they were trying to obfuscate or obscure the fact that we are dealing with criminals here who are in violation of United States laws the instant they set foot over that border without permission. And for those people who are legal citizens, you know, I sincerely hope that the United States lives up to your expectations. that led you to go through that long and arduous process to become legal U.S. citizens. And we'd have absolutely no problem. You know, welcome, come on in, have a lot of fun. But I'm still, especially from some of the cartoons I've been creating and some of the comments they make about crocodiles in the Rio Grande, which is supposed to be humor, I'm still getting a flood of emails about you're a racist, you're a racist, you're racist, it's a racist, you know, your name is Rivero, you're Hispanic. No, actually it's Sephardic. And my reply to that is always the same. Hey, clueless one, illegal is not a race. And that's the issue. The legality, not the race. It's just like Samantha Power in her comment about soaring anti-Semitism. No, it isn't anti-Semitism. It is just and legitimate criticism of the behavior of Israel's government. And our First Amendment gives us the right to criticize government, all government, everywhere, without fear of repercussion. If I can point to one thing I think the Trump presidency is going to be good for, is it's going to shake things up, and a lot of this liberal frippery and PC nonsense is going to fall away. It's time to return to simple common sense. Let's get the job done. And stop worrying about whether what we're doing is offending somebody somewhere on the planet or might endanger a beetle. Because, as George Carlin pointed out, things go extinct all the time. 99% of all the life forms on Earth have gone extinct. Humans had nothing to do with it. It's just part of the nature's evolution. But just like Trump wants to put America first, I want to put human beings first. I want to see a return to the thinking of the Renaissance, where man was the center of the universe as opposed to God or the nobility. We need to do that. I mean, one of the things I found so absurd about the liberals was this idea, and even Hillary Clinton said this, it's okay to kill a human being right up to the moment of birth. It's not a sin, you shouldn't feel bad about it. But if you damage an eagle's egg, you're going to go to prison. Now, I don't plan on damaging any eagles' eggs. I rather like looking at eagles. But it does show this, that the liberal philosophy was actually anti-humanist. And in recent weeks, we've seen these unrelenting attacks on straight white males as somehow being the authors of all the evil in the world. And as I've said many times on this show before, you don't end discrimination by discriminating in reverse. You don't end racism with more racism. You don't end inequality by being unequal or demanding unequal treatment. Donald Trump, I think, is going to bring back common sense to our American society. Of just letting go of all this cultural Marxism nonsense where we're supposed to not say certain things and not do certain things and not even think certain things. One thing I'd like to see Trump do is retask our entire education system, including all those universities, to actually educating our kids so that we can become a manufacturing superpower again. Instead of just cranking out art history majors who can be relied on to vote the liberal ticket for the rest of their lives. Now then, a little bit of history. Now that we're starting to allow criticism of the CIA as now publicly accepted discourse, story surfaced from over an Investment Watch blog, and I was already familiar with this. Some of the things the CIA has done are pretty bizarre, and some of these guys, I can imagine, had a lot of fun doing it. As part of the MK Ultra program here, let me get some water and see if I can clear up my voice a bit here. Testing, 1, 2, 3, a little better. As part of the MKUltra program, the CIA actually set up a bondage bordello in San Francisco where they had prostitutes working for them who would lure clients back to this bordello, and along with everything else that they were doing, would dose them with LSD to see if this kind of combination of kinky sex and acid would work as an interrogation device. And they ran this thing for 9 years. And I'm sure they had a heck of a lot of fun. And they produced no results whatsoever. Now, the story that Investment Watchblog came on out with, at one point the CIA hit on this plan to turn cats into mobile spy devices. And they would literally take these cats, they would try and capture the cats around places like the Russian embassy, and they would take the cat and open it up surgically, implant this radio transmitter with some kind of a long-lasting power source. They literally ran the antenna down the cat's tail. The problem with that is the tail no longer worked normally, and they were just hoping nobody would notice that. And the first one failed miserably when the cat got away from them, ran into the street, and was run over. So they went back and tried again. And after all this work and all this money, do you know what the CIA learned about the Russian embassy? It had mice. That was it. Your government tax dollars at work, as it were. Now then, over at Natural News, and they do a lot of good work over there, they have just announced their top 10 science rear-end hat of the year awards, being handed out to the hucksters and frauds of science, medicine, and biotech. And they're going on out there just saying that so many of these people being presented as scientists to you are not acting scientific. They're there as propagandists. And number one on their list is Bill Nye, who they describe as the science fraud guy. Now, Bill Nye is the son of Louis Nye, who was a comedian. If you're my age, you'll remember who he was. And he got this award because he originally came on out saying GMOs are very, very dangerous. And then all of a sudden Monsanto approached him, and he got to visit Monsanto headquarters, and who knows what all else went on in the discussion. And all of a sudden he's pro-GMO, and really, I'm Bill Nye, the science guy, you should love your GMOs. And very obviously his opinion was for sale, and that's not real science. Natural News is also taking to task Neil deGrasse Tyson, who is also out there saying there's nothing wrong with GMOs. He's pushing global warming and the Big Bang Theory. Now, there's nobody that's got money behind the Big Bang Theory, but I think, you know my opinion. I think it's religion masquerading as science. We got to take a break for commercials. We're going to come on back with more of these awards for pseudoscience, followed by our hour of clarification. We'll be right back. Hello, America. Welcome back to the show here, and I'm watching the inaugural parade, and they just had a whole formation of tractors float on by there, which seems kind of interesting. Boy, tractors are not what they were when I was driving one as a kid. Anyway, getting on back to Natural News and their awards for science hucksters and frauds for the last year. Number 3 on the list is California Senator Richard Pan, who's been the driving force behind all of these laws in California to mandate all these vaccines for California children and to take away any grounds for objection by the parents, absent a doctor's note saying this vaccine will kill them. And they may even see a surge in doctors who that's their entire business. Ever since medical marijuana became legal in California, there are practices by brand new medical students where that's all they do. Somebody comes in and says, oh, I'm dealing with, here's a prescription for marijuana, and that's it. We're going to see doctors' offices where parents are going to come on in and say, I think this vaccine's dangerous for my kid, and the doctor's going to say, absolutely, here's your exception. People are going to fight back on that nonsense. Let's see. Natural News is also pointing the finger at David H. Gorski, otherwise known as the Psycho Blogger, who basically seems to make his living by going online and attacking anybody who questions any of the orthodox science, whether it's vaccine safety, GMO, human-caused global warming. And, of course, Dr. Fareed Fata made the list, who's the doctor who basically was sentenced to 45 years in prison for selling radiation and chemotherapy treatments to perfectly healthy patients, some of whom were made sick and died, and they didn't have cancer to begin with. And he defrauded Medicare and insurance companies out of more than $30 million. That's probably what they threw him in prison for, you know, not the deaths or anything. And then, of course, Bill Gates makes the list because he's been declared the master of the Zika virus hoax, which appears to have been created to protect a link between the microcephalic epidemic in Brazil with the mandatory vaccination campaign for pregnant women that began the year earlier. Oh, no, it's not the vaccines. Couldn't ever possibly be the vaccines here. It's got to be the Zika virus. And then it led to the screams about epidemics here in the U.S. and massive spraying, which was very profitable for those politicians who owned interests in those spraying companies, and devastated the honeybee populations on which natural organic food depends. Kevin Folta is on the Natural News list as the ultimate Monsanto shill. And then, of course, the former CDC director, current Merck shill, the people at Planned Parenthood, and it goes on and on. John Entine, the ultimate GMO apologist, corporate propagandist. And there's the music. We're going to take a break for station identification, and we'll be back for our hour of clarification. And aloha, welcome back to our show. And for those of you watching on BAM Music TV, this gorgeous creature sitting behind me is the lovely Lady Claire, here for our hour of clarification. But before we let her clarify, we're going to take a phone call here from Terry in Oregon. Aloha, Terry. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey Mike, I heard this morning that the ADL is upset that Trump used the phrase "America First."
Yes.
Because they said it was anti-Semitic.
They've been saying that all year. They've been saying that all year long. I mean, the ADL's attitude is it should be Israel first, or you're not a real American.
Right. They said something about that's the phrase that Charles Lindbergh used when he tried to keep us out of World War II, and he was anti-Semitic. So we can't use that term anymore. America First.
Well, I'm going to go on using
America Last. Yeah, America Last, that might make them a little happier, but Israel First would really make them happy.
Well,
okay, Mike, thank you.
All right, you're welcome. All right, we're gonna let you go here, and we're gonna close the phone lines for a bit. What is your first story?
Well, I had a little anecdote to share with our audience, and this is hysterically funny in many ways. Racist Trump supporters raised $650,000 to have black marching band play at the inauguration. And after rapper Snoop Dogg promised to roast any African Americans who performed at Donald Trump's inauguration, racist Trump supporters have raised $650,000 to have a predominantly black marching band play at today's events.
I just saw them go by on the parade there, and they're really very, very good.
Oh, they are.
But you see, Donald Trump's election and what he's actually doing is, first of all, exposing all the lies that were told about him during the campaign. He's racist, he's sexist, he's this, he's that. But more than that is the liberal agenda is sold to people on this idea, this myth, that their lack of success in life is because they're victims of some oppressor class. Women are being oppressed by men. The gays are oppressed by the straight people. The blacks are oppressed by the whites. The Mexicans are oppressed by I don't know who. And any time that you have somebody that breaks out of that, like the Talladega Band marching in the inauguration, or all of Trump's supporters ponying up the money to get them there.
Yeah, and GoFundMe.
And on a
Yeah.
GoFundMe page.
Yeah.
Or Melania Trump or Ivanka Trump, who are beautiful and very successful women.
Yeah.
It undermines that whole victimhood sales pitch.
Yeah.
And that's why the liberals are thrashing around. And even now, they're still throwing stones through windows and crying. And there's all these videos being posted of Hillary supporters just breaking into tears as Trump takes the oath of office. People, you need to grow up. You're adults. Again, it's like, can any of these people really deal with the real world, with a real job? Or are they just, should we take all these liberal universities and then turn them into convents and monasteries so these people won't have to actually deal with the outside world ever again?
Yeah, and I've noticed it, and I'd like to take a moment to comment. There have been riots that have been very violent, disaffected youth threw eggs at guests and set fires outside of Trump International Hotel as people attempted to make their way to the new administration's Deplora Ball. But with the inauguration now over, protesters are showing no signs of slowing down as chaotic scenes of rioters destroying private property are flooding Twitter. Now, what this is, and the DNC had better sit back and listen, folks, because this is the new face of the DNC, unhinged, churlish, and prone to mayhem and destruction when it does not get its way. And hey, Donna Brazil, how about it?
It's not just the Democratic Party and the DNC here.
Yeah.
This is the new public image of liberalism itself. And they're just like the corporate media, the longer they persist in this childish behavior, the longer it's going to be before they can recover from it.
Yeah.
They could literally collapse the whole idea of liberalism in the left wing. I was saying earlier in the show, we might actually see the Democratic Party have to rebrand, rename itself, or reform, or the Democratic Party might actually simply collapse. And I don't want us to be a one-party nation like the Soviet Union.
No.
But we should be a multi-party nation. But apparently, I don't know where these people are getting their advice or their thoughts, because certainly they were running their campaigns with a lot of advertising agencies and public relations firms, and I'm sure these public relations firms are saying, what you're doing is not good for your brand.
Yeah.
But it's simply that Hillary supporters have their heads filled with all this nonsense about, Trump is going to eat your babies alive, and he's going to fling your parents, into fire pits and all the rest of it, and they're acting out. It's like that horrible tragedy in Chicago where these 4 black people kidnapped and tortured a mentally challenged white person, acting like this was somehow their right to do because of all the oppression of slavery and so forth. And again, a reminder, nobody alive today has ever been a slave other than that we are all slaves to that 1040 form, and nobody alive today has been a slave owner. And of course, they keep trying to sell this idea that, well, you're descended from slave owners, therefore you are guilty and owe us reparations. Well, in my case, I'm descended from a family that ran a station on the Underground Railroad, so kindly shut the heck up. You don't know what you're talking about.
Yeah.
We're going to take a second to do a shout-out to our on-air affiliates rejoining the network, and we're going to go back here to the Lady Claire.
Apparently, on his last news conference, there was a rather stunning admission from Obama on WikiLeaks DNC emails. And he said that the DNC emails were leaked, but not hacked.
Yes.
And I think that's hysterical. And beginning at about 8 minutes and change in, Obama admitted that they had no evidence of how WikiLeaks got the DNC material. This undermines the stream of completely evidence-free nonsense that's been emerging from the U.S. intelligence services this last couple of months, in which a series of suppositions have been strung together to make unfounded assertions that have been repeated again and again and again in the mainstream.
And even the New York Slimes last night was still out there trying to say there are links between Trump and Russia.
Prove them.
Well, there are business links, but there's nothing nefarious about that.
No.
Trump does business all over the world. Now,
Yeah.
of course, he's stepped down from that, and he's basically handed his company to his sons.
Mm-hmm.
But again, it was all supposition. There was one in the BBC just a day or so ago where the entire article was that Russia could have done this. Russia might be able to do this.
Yeah.
And, you know, especially looking back, you know, on Saddam's weapons of mass destruction and Assad's sarin gas. This is just more of the same. And the corporate media, as I've mentioned many times before, they're trapped by their own business model. They are paid huge amounts of money to be convincing liars to the public, and they can't stop being convincing liars to the public without losing all that money. The only problem is nobody's convinced anymore.
Yeah, you know, you can't believe anything the prostitutes say, because they are shilling to fulfill an agenda. That's it, folks.
Yes.
And if you don't go over to the independent media once in a while, do a reality check, you're going to get shilled into believing a lot of stuff that just isn't real. And you don't want that.
Like human-caused global warming. Insert ominous music here.
Yes, I hear you. No. But that is why, Mike, the independent media movement is getting so strong right now. It's really a phenomenon of people who want to be told the truth, or at least decide for themselves what that truth is because they've been looking at facts.
Well, again, as I mentioned earlier in the show, I see 2017 as the year of the rise of independent media. The audiences are coming over here, the advertisers are coming over here, and what we're doing collectively, all of us, is we're restoring journalism as it originally was, with a diversity of viewpoints and opinions presented to an American people, and then trusting that the American people are able to figure out for themselves what's going on.
Right. Absolutely.
And in that regard, we have indeed effected a significant change on the American culture and society. If there's one thing that we can point to as a victory for the independent media, is that we have taken away from the government and the corporate media their ability to lie to the public with impunity, and they're not ever going to get it back.
No. We have been able to claim the moral high ground and been pretty doggone right a lot of the time, and it's not just one organization. I think it's the whole community.
That's exactly. It's a community thing. It's a collective.
Yeah.
And just like the rulers of Europe were not able to go back to things as they were before once Gutenberg made books affordable to the middle class.
Yeah.
We're not going to see a return to the corporate media propaganda machine of the 60s, 70s, 80s, and 90s.
Yeah.
It's just not going to happen. We're going to see institutions are either going to have to adapt to this new reality of a better informed, a self-informed citizenry, or they're going to collapse and go extinct.
Yeah. There is no really any kind of middle ground on that, I don't think.
Nope.
Yeah. I would like to sort of bop over to Syria, where something very major is happening. And it was on Global Research today. The Syrian army launched a large-scale campaign against ISIS-Daesh in Aleppo province. And this started on January the 9th. The government forces took control over several villages. And the army and the NDF, led by the Tiger forces, liberated Balorain in eastern Aleppo countryside, south of the group's stronghold of Al-Bab. They also retook the villages of Afrin and Rasam al-Abed from ISIS in the same area. And Mike, I think that this is very hopeful for the Syrian government that it may, with Russia's help, get their country back.
Yeah, and again, Trump has already stated that the U.S. policy of foreign interventions, especially the covert ones, ends on his watch. And because he very clearly has signaled in his inauguration speech his opposition to the push for a one-world government and globalism, I think over the next several years we're going to start seeing countries going back to their own people. Libya, Yemen, Syria, and so forth. Because there's nothing wrong with a nation belonging to its own people and being run by its own people. And that was another very subtle message in Trump's speech, where he talks about how we, the American people, own the United States, and we do, and it is our rightful place to be making decisions what this country is doing.
Absolutely. I found the speech very powerful, very honest, brutally honest, and I hope that he does have the wherewithal to be able to come through on what he's promised to the American people, because that could be absolutely incredible.
But again, Trump by himself is not going to be able to accomplish anything. He's dealing with an obstructionist Congress, and many of the old neocon, neoliberal war hawks are still holding office. Whether they should be or not is a matter for another show. And he's dealing with an openly adversarial corporate media which sees itself as fighting for its very life right now. And all of these parties are desperate, and nothing is more dangerous than a desperate cornered animal. So again, our work has not ended with the inauguration of President Trump. It is just beginning. We're going to have a nice relaxing weekend. Monday we get back to work. Because for Donald Trump to bring about the changes we want, we, the American people, are going to have to stand shoulder to shoulder with him. We're going to have to be glaring through the windows in those offices of the senators and representatives and say, you work for us. And the instant you forget that, we will do to you next election what we did to Hillary last election. We will overcome the election fraud, and we will kick you out.
Amen.
And again, my focus for the next 2 years, till the midterm elections, is going to be arguing for a complete overhaul of our nation's election system. I've written an article about it. I included it in the letter that I sent to the White House just this morning. We have to restore an election system that the American people have confidence in is accurately reflecting the will of the American people. One of the greatest treasons committed by the corporate media was following Jill Stein's failed attempt at a recount. It surfaced there had been massive election fraud favoring Hillary Clinton. In fact, it was documented in 5 states. None of the corporate media even mentioned that.
Not a word. Not a word.
And all we heard was, you can't question the election system. That's an attack on democracy itself. Well, it's time to question the accuracy, honesty, and fairness of our election system. And we have a president who's going to be sympathetic to that because he had to fight against that rigged election system to win the White House. And if he doesn't do something about it, it's going to be twice as bad in 2020.
I agree, absolutely. I'd like to go over to Myanmar right now because this issue with the Rohingya Muslim population is starting to explode. Apparently the other day the Malaysian Prime Minister told Myanmar on Thursday to stop all discrimination and attacks on the Rohingya Muslims and urged the world's Islamic countries to act to end an unfolding human tragedy. Now, I don't know exactly what he means on act to end. I hope that he is not talking about an outright invasion, because that's not going to work very well either. And Malaysia has spoken out strongly against mostly Buddhist Myanmar over its treatment of its Rohingya minority, especially since October, when security forces launched a crackdown in the north of Rakhine state on the Bangladeshi border where many of the Rohingya live. And at least 86 people have been killed, and an estimated 66,000 have fled into Bangladesh since 9 Myanmar policemen were killed on October 9th in attacks on border posts. And the Myanmar government blamed Rohingya supported by foreign militants. And what this guy said, Razak, the killing must stop. The violation of women and children must stop. And he was speaking during an address to Muslim-majority Malaysia on a meeting of the Organization of Islamic Cooperation, called by Malaysia to discuss the Rohingya. Now, I've got a memo to Nobel Peace Prize winner Aung San Suu Kyi, who is now the head Duomo over there. Sorry, my dear sister, but the world cannot possibly see the atrocities that have been documented in your country. So I have a message for her. If she doesn't like the reality that the world is witnessing this persecution of your ethnic Muslim minorities, and Malaysian Minister Razak is calling you out on this, then stop the darn behavior by your military against them in the first place.
Well, the same thing applies to Israel. I mean, Israel's running around saying, you shouldn't be reporting on what's going on in Palestine. It makes us look bad. Well, stop doing it.
Yeah.
No, we want to do these bad things. If you're reporting on them, then you're a dirty, filthy anti-Semite who wants Hitler to come back and gas the Jewish babies in the ovens.
You know, and I've got to say that I really appreciate what Malaysian Minister Razak had to say here, because it's terrible, this persecution, and you know, I never thought this lifetime I would have to say, watch out, here come the Buddhists. But you know, I mean, what would Buddha do, for heaven's sakes? I mean, if he were able to come back and reincarnate, I don't think he'd be terrifically happy with what's going on in Myanmar right now, essentially in the name of the religion that he founded. What do you think?
Well, again, it gets back to something I've said a lot of times. Good people are going to do good things. Bad people are going to do bad things, and both will often claim that they're doing the will of the gods.
And I have to wonder, with this Aung San Suu Kyi, about that Nobel Peace Prize. Now, am I recalling correctly, but isn't that the same Peace Prize that our President warmonger Obama received?
The exact same one.
Henry Kissinger.
And Al Gore.
And Al Gore,
yes. Well, actually, technically, Al Gore did not win the Nobel Peace Prize. He accepted it on behalf of a global warming organization. But if you ask Al Gore, he says he won the Nobel Peace Prize.
Oh, of course.
Of course he does.
Of course.
Along with inventing the Internet.
Yeah. And I have to wonder exactly how and why Aung San Suu Kyi was put back in a position of authority.
Diebold.
Well, I don't know about that, but I think that there is some stuff going on, and I'm probably going to be researching it a little bit more next week and coming back with some information. Why her and why now?
Well, again, we need to understand that in addition to the countries that we know the U.S. is trying to overthrow covertly, that there are probably many others where the early stages of the groundwork are just now being laid. And they have not escalated to the point where people are noticing what's going on. But Myanmar may, in fact, be just now coming up to that point. We have to take a break for commercials. Back with more clarity after these few words. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. And what is next on your list?
Well, this comes from antiwar.com and Justine Raimondo, a blogger whose work I have come to really appreciate. And the title of this is Chelsea Manning, a hero for our times. The commutation of her sentence by President Barack Obama is bad politics. And from his vantage point, the only moral act on his part that he can recall. It took, let's say, male attributes to do this, and for that I have to give him credit. One also has to note that the timing is significant. With his party currently in the midst of a campaign to smear WikiLeaks, and the president-elect as Russian tools, Obama's merciful act undercuts the entire basis of the charge that both Julian Assange and Donald Trump are agents of a foreign power.
Yes.
After all, Manning's revelations were published by WikiLeaks, this supposedly perfidious agent of Russian intelligence. If the administration really believes that the characterization of Assange's outfit then doesn't freeing Chelsea, the Natasha of Boris and Natasha, encourage more acts of espionage? Well, he says, heck no. Which brings us to the central issue in the case. Is Chelsea Manning a traitor, as outraged neocons are now claiming? The emphatic answer is absolutely not.
No, Chelsea Manning, Bradley Manning, was a whistleblower.
Yeah.
And we used to have, and we need to restore, laws that protect whistleblowers. What's really interesting, a lot of people don't remember this, there used to be whistleblower protection for the military in this country. And it was rescinded by President Bill Clinton immediately following the shoot-down of TWA 800. And it was initially specifically revoked for those members of the military who were taking part in the recovery of the debris. And over time, it's now been extended. There has been a war on whistleblowers in this country ever since. But whistleblowers serve a necessary function of exposing wrongdoing, both corporate and political. And again, whistleblowing is protected speech under the First Amendment.
Absolutely. And Justine goes on to mention that Chelsea Manning was never charged with treason. No doubt the government thought it could never get a conviction for treason, or else they would have done so. And part of the reason for that is not a single document revealed by Chelsea's action was ever labeled top secret, which is in itself not a top secret, top-level category in our national security lexicon. And secondly, in spite of testimony at Manning's trial that Obama's bin Laden had requested to see the Afghan war logs published by WikiLeaks, not a single person was killed or injured as a result of this particular revelation. The alleged harm was minimal to non-existent, but the benefits to the people of the United States and the world by this publication of these documents was profoundly important. Mike, I tend to agree with him.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
There's no question about it. Manning did not intend to harm the United States and betray us to an enemy. Manning was actually, if you think about it, in compliance with the Uniform Code of Military Justice, much of which was written in the wake of the Nuremberg trials following World War II, in which you are allowed, as a serving member of the military, to refuse an illegal, immoral order, and you are allowed to report when your superiors are engaged in illegal and immoral actions. So Manning was actually legally in the clear because none of the stuff was classified. And again, as I mentioned, the reason Obama pardoned Manning was to get at Julian Assange, because Assange had made that deal. If you will pardon Manning, I will turn myself in. But again, if Julian Assange did not approach and solicit anybody to blow the whistle, then he too is legally in the clear. If you are a member of the media, which I think WikiLeaks has to qualify as.
Absolutely, at this point.
Okay, if somebody walks up to you unannounced and hands you an envelope with the missing part of Richard Nixon's audio tapes, and you publish it, you can't be prosecuted. But if you go back to that person and say, do you have any more classified information I could have, at that point it's a Title 18 violation. If they would have to prove that Julian Assange solicited classified information in order to put him into prison, which doesn't mean they won't do it on some kangaroo court principle. Yeah. We'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. And before we go back for more clarification here, we're going to take a phone call. John in Rancho Cucamonga, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Yeah, good afternoon, Michael, and I trust your clarification. Claire is still listening, is still there on the show with you?
I'm right here. I'm right here.
Oh, that's terrific,
Yeah.
Claire. Good to hear your voice. Hey, I talked to your one and only several months ago about your adulation of Justin Raimondo, excuse me. And I told him what I had found out. I subscribed to a magazine called The Chronicles. It's published in Rockford, Illinois.
Okay.
They tout themselves as being a pretty conservative magazine. Comes out once a month, and for the most part it is. And but when he got done with this one particular article, and in all the years that I've been getting the Chronicles, 7 or 8 years, he never said one word about 9/11. And then in this one article, he caused me to do some research to find out what he ever did say about 9/11. I did all kinds of browser searches, and I couldn't find one article about 9/11 authored by Justin Raimondo. Now that's kind of weird. So
no, it's not necessarily. It's not necessarily weird. You know, there are some people in the independent media who maintain a broad focus. There are others who, for the most part, are tuned into a particular issue, such as natural news, as science and health and vaccine safety. Others are basically looking more at the corruption inside Washington, D.C. So the fact that Justin isn't covering a particular story does not necessarily mean anything other than it isn't what he wants to focus on.
And what
I do recall, I thought I did, I'm sorry, go ahead, Claire.
What I have read of his seems to me very intelligently written, very whole, and very sane. And I do appreciate him, but again, maybe this area of 9/11 is something that is just not his immediate focus. There are other things on which he's focused.
I mean, there are issues going on in the world today where I simply don't look because I don't have the time. No one person can cover it all. Okay?
I understand that, Mike. Right.
Okay.
Right. Let me just tell you what he said, okay? I forgot to, again, it was 2 or 3 years ago. I know I have the piece of paper. My friend Marty Hill will vouch for that, and I'm sure I can ask him to post this on his website, libertyfight.com. But what he said was, in reference to 9/11 Truth Movement, he pretty much stated that, that the two of us, you and I, Mike, I'm a member of Architects and Engineers for 9/11 Truth. I know you're quite in that, along the lines in that movement also, by your words and deeds and so forth.
Mm-hmm.
But he's pretty much referred to us all as a bunch of crackpots. In that word, crackpots.
Well, he has a right to that opinion, and again, as I mentioned earlier in the show, the important thing about the independent media is it does present a diversity of opinions, and that's his opinion. Our opinion is different, and we agree to disagree. So thank you very much for the phone call, and we're going to let you go here. Now, folks, this is not a time when the independent media should be attacking each other because we don't always agree on everything.
Amen.
We already have the corporate media wanting to attack us. We have the old entrenched remnants of the oligarchy are out to attack us. Let's not help them carry out their plans here.
And what Justin Raimondo may or may not think of us, frankly, for me, is none of my business.
Well, obviously there's an area of concern, but again, he may not have looked closely enough at that issue, or there may be something else entirely. We do know that there is an issue at 9/11, and a lot of people don't agree with our conclusions, especially over there in Israel. What is your next story?
Well, apparently, it's looking like, and this is coming from a number of sources, North Korea may be readying missile tests, timing unclear. U.S. officials have been listening and looking and seeing indications that North Korea may be preparing for a new missile test launch in the coming days or weeks in what could be an early test of President Donald Trump's administration.
Why is it a test for Donald Trump's administration when another country carries out a test?
I know.
And first of all, let us be very honest, North Korea has not really had a lot of success with their rockets anyway.
No. Guidance seems to be an issue. Call me silly.
Well, they also have a bad tendency of falling apart during the staging.
Right.
But here's the situation. The reason North Korea has been talking tough, I mean, besides the fact that their president is a nutcase, it's always been in response to all of this saber rattling by the United States and South Korea.
Yeah.
And if Donald Trump is absolutely honest about pulling America back from all of this overseas intervention, then North Korea is going to decide, well, let's convert these things to commercial space launchers. Let's put up communication satellites and something useful with them, and the whole thing is going to tone down. Everywhere in the world where you see the corporate media screaming, they're building bombs, they're building this, they're building that, it's because they feel threatened by, or they felt threatened by, the United States government. That was certainly true with Russia, which is looking at all those NATO forces along their border. That's certainly true when Iran was looking at building allowed weapons. It's because they're hearing Israel and the U.S. always talking about invading Iran, smashing it up. And we need to go back and look who the aggressors really are.
And one of the things I think President Trump needs to do right the heck now, and put the guy on his speed dial, is China's President Xi Jinping. And if I massacred the pronunciation, I do apologize to people who speak the language. And Michael, I say this because what needs to happen here is that the U.S. working in concert with China and South Korea can very possibly get North Korea back to the negotiation table and substitute a true peace treaty for the current armistice with trade guarantees.
Yeah, that would be the way to settle it down. But remember, the U.S. government's agenda was to keep the Koreas divided. I mean, 5 years ago, they were talking about reunification like Germany.
And now it's become illegal. The current government has said you can't talk about that anymore.
Yeah, and the U.S. went in and mucked around there because in the agenda of a war against the U.S. Federal Reserve note and the Russian ruble and the Chinese yuan, the U.S. was looking at North Korea as their back door to a war with China. Well, if that agenda is going to be taken off the table, then everybody can kind of calm down
and take a deep
pull
breath.
back
Yeah.
from all this nonsense.
I hear you. And the other thing, if this doesn't happen and a peace treaty doesn't happen, any U.S. military response will almost inevitably bring China into a war on North Korea's side. And, Mike, we are so horrifically unprepared for such a war that President Trump is going to find it pretty incredible when he is briefed on U.S. military readiness.
Well, he's already aware of the disaster of the F-35. And I'll be very, very honest, if North Korea were to provoke some kind of a confrontation, I am not convinced China would necessarily wade on in. Because China recognizes the larger issue. It's like how they were trying to bait Russia into eastern Ukraine, and Putin did not take the bait.
Right.
Okay? Because he knew that's what the U.S. government wanted. And I'm pretty sure China is well aware of the U.S. desire for a direct conflict. And if North Korea were to do something reckless, China would say, look, we didn't sign up for you to start a war for us. And I don't think China would actually intervene. And I can't imagine why anybody would want to invade North Korea right now. Their economy is an absolute disaster. When they were talking about reunification, one of the sticking points was that South Korea was going to have to pick up the huge cost of it all.
Yeah, that's no good. But I do hope that there's better communication between the U.S., South Korea, and China on this to try to lure North Korea back to the negotiating table to get this peace deal going so that they stop developing their nuclear weapons programs.
Well, North Korea, I'm not sure that they're actually developing their own nuclear weapons, because the first time they had an underground test, there was a surveillance aircraft over, and it collected some of the fallout. And the report I saw was that the isotopic signature of North Korea's first nuclear test matched that of the so-called Vela incident, which is thought to have been a joint Israel-South African nuclear test.
Okay.
Now, we know that Israel has been caught for trying to sell clandestine nuclear weapons to other countries, complete violation of the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty, which Israel pointedly refuses to sign. And so it's entirely possible that North Korea has bought nuclear weapons from Israel.
That's eminently possible.
Yes.
But I do want to see that resolved in a way that doesn't involve going to war.
I think we'd all like to avoid a war. And one of the reasons I like Donald Trump is his model is peace through commerce. The only problem he's dealing with right now is the United States doesn't really have much of anything anybody wants to buy anymore. Our manufacturing is in decline. We're producing poor quality products. Even our weapons are no longer seen as desirable by other countries, and nobody wants our GMO agriculture. So it's going to be a long slog. It's not going to happen overnight. It took 30 years for the narcocracy to bring the United States to this stage. It could easily take 30 years to bring it back to what it was before.
Absolutely. I'd like to now sort of bop on over to Israel, where there was a very intriguing question being asked. Will the tangled web of corruption finally dethrone King Bibi Netanyahu?
Oh, I'd love to see that
And
happen.
almost every night on TV and every day in newspapers, purported leaks have appeared describing what the media say are details of the investigation. Excuse me. These leaks, though, have fueled opposition calls for Netanyahu to go, and separate opinion polls conducted on behalf of the Jerusalem Post, the Walla news website, the Globe's business newspaper, and Channel 2 all show that his party's popularity is slipping. Netanyahu has said that the media is out to get him and he has no intention of stepping down. Well, Netanyahu's leadership has made Israel a pariah state relative to his
following in a long tradition.
Yeah.
But he is one of the most hardline people, and Netanyahu, especially since 9/11, has never hesitated, never missed an opportunity to humiliate and humble the United States of America, which is why I suspect, following on the theory that the U.S. government, CIA, and Israel worked together to get 9/11 going, is that 9/11 turned around and is now blackmailing the U.S. government, saying if you don't give us what we want, we'll tell the world who really did 9/11, and it'll be worse for you than it will be for us.
Well, look at that $38 billion over 10-year agreement, statement of understanding between the U.S.
And look at all the members of Congress like Lindsey Graham. Oh, it's nowhere near enough. You must give them more.
Yeah, it's really amazing. But I do hope, like the drip, drip, drip of Clinton Gate, that Netanyahu Gate will have a positive effect on ending this man's regime.
Well, that would certainly, it would be nice to see a more moderate leader in Israel, and I get email from people who live in Israel who are of the same opinion. Netanyahu does not have overwhelming support of the people of Israel itself. They think all this violence is unnecessary.
Yes.
But Israel, like the United States, is dealing with this corrupted oligarchical plutocracy that's, you know, trying to run their country like it's a Bronze Age tribal kingdom, where we shall go forth and smite the enemy. Unfortunately, in a world with nuclear weapons, the smiting can easily get out of control.
Right. I would like to kind of bop over to India, which is ready to deploy a massive tank army along the border with Pakistan. And they're getting ready to deploy over 460 new T-90SM main battle tanks along India's border with Pakistan. And this was confirmed by senior Indian defense officials who told IAS Jane's Defense Weekly on January 19th, yesterday. It's apparently the most modern version of the T-90 and has been specifically designed for export by Russia. People are kind of twigging on to the fact that Russian weapons are not too bad.
No, they had that giant open-air demonstration all over Syria, and they're hearing these horror stories about recent U.S. weapons, and the only reason U.S. weapons are still being bought is because of prior treaty obligations and understandings. And that has also been a continuing pattern of the U.S. government for the last 30 years, make junk products, dangerous products, and then sign trade agreements with other countries that force them to buy and import our products and sell them to their people. And one of the major sticking points for both the Trans-Pacific Partnership and the Transatlantic Trade and Investment Partnership was the ban on GMO labeling and the enforcing of purchase of GMO products from the United States, going to countries that already had GMO labeling and have already banned GMO, like Russia and China.
And I do have a memo to the Indian and Pakistani governments. In light of the fact that they are both nuclear-armed countries with a history of mortal combat and wars, I'm hoping that the top leadership kind of pulls away from the brink, because such a war could potentially go nuclear in a heartbeat, and the results would be both unthinkable and the consequences catastrophic and irreversible. And so I'm hoping that saner heads are going to prevail, and that at the highest level possible, there needs to be a way that they walk this back and find a way of ratcheting down the tensions.
That would certainly be nice.
Yeah.
That would certainly be nice.
I'd like to go over now to China, which has created an agreement to pour $3 billion into Iran's refining capacity. China will apparently invest $3 billion in the upgrade of Iran's oil refining facilities, Iranian media reported, with the bulk of the investment going into the Abadan refinery. According to Iranian Oil Minister Abbas Kazemi, China has already opened the financing for the refinery's upgrade. Iran's oil and gas infrastructure has suffered from years of neglect because of the insufficient maintenance funds during the sanction years, as well as access to new technology and equipment.
Well, there's another factor as well, and that is that Iran fell into the trap of selling raw petroleum and really did not previously have a significant investment in refining capacity to produce finished product. And that was kind of short-sighted. I believe that policy goes back to the Shah. And so now China is stepping on in. They're going to build up the refining capacity, and I'm certain that Iran and China are going to do a brisk business with oil and gas and whatever it is China wants to send back in exchange for it. And we're seeing the U.S. literally, and Europe for that matter, being economically destroyed by all this sanctions nonsense.
And the ongoing wars. And my observation, China and Iran are making deals to secure what they need. And over the past 16 years, the U.S. government has been waging wars of aggression to do the same.
Okay, we got to take a break for commercials. We'll be right back. Hello, America. Welcome back to the show here. Last segment of our program on this Trump inauguration day, and we're so happy about that. Quick little comment. Earlier in the week, we reported on how the U.S. government had proclaimed they had bombed some terrorist camps in Libya and killed a couple of dozen supposed terrorists. We're not really sure, we never will be, using a pair of B-2 Spirit bombers that basically flew all the way from the United States for 34 hours. Cost of this mission, $8.8 million, not including the aerial refueling aircraft and the JDAM missiles, to get 24 people. Good thinking. Good planning here. All right, you had a story you wanted to take us out with?
Yeah, apparently there are a number of Republican legislators who want to criminalize peaceful protest. And in some states, nonviolent demonstrating may soon carry increased legal risks, including punishing fines and significant prison terms for people who participate in protests involving civil disobedience. And over the past couple of weeks, Republican legislators across the country have quietly introduced a number of proposals to criminalize and discourage peaceful protest. And to those state legislators who believe that such legislation is a good idea, I would like to remind them that the right to peacefully assemble and protest resides in the DNA of what it means to be a citizen of the United States of America.
The First Amendment.
You got it. And
yes.
Yeah, absolutely.
This will never survive a Supreme Court test. What we need are some Supreme Court tests for the laws that have already been passed that specifically ban protesting certain industries, like animal rights protests. And by the way, you got to pay attention to what the government is doing to those Dakota Access Pipeline protesters right now.
Oh boy, it's bad.
Under the cover of the inauguration, and the corporate media is looking at Washington, D.C., they're just uncorking on those people for just wanting to not have to drink toxic water. If they wanted to drink toxic water, they'd move to Flint, Michigan.
Yeah, and they've already installed rocket launchers, as we reported earlier this week on the site.
Yeah, the police and forces, they don't want any media coverage. They don't want any independent media coverage of what's being done to those Dakota Access Pipeline protesters. So they now have missiles to shoot down any camera drones they see over the area.
Right. That's desperation on the cusp of madness.
It really is, and it's showing that under the narcocracy, corporations have come to see themselves as above the law, where Obama actually issued an order to this pipeline company to stand down, and they said, no, we're not going to do that. I think we're getting to a point here where we need to decide and reaffirm who runs this country. And Donald Trump just said this morning, it's the American people. And we've just seen epic abuses by corporations, whether it's oil pipelines, toxic vaccines, GMO, unsafe foods in the stores. It's time for that to come to an end. There's the music. Time for us to get out of here on this Pow Hunter Friday and Trump Inauguration Day. We'll be back Monday on the Republic Broadcasting Network. Hopefully my voice will be all better by then. So have a good weekend. Celebrate Trump's inauguration. And aloha, America.